it. And so, it was a mixture of being burnt out and also just having other things that I wanted to do in my life that, not having vacation and not having a big chunk of time off would allow me to do. So, invest in some things that were, I think, important versus urgent, like some of the spiritual side and, getting outdoors for a long period of time.
And so did you have a big sabbatical of your own that kind of inspired you to study this more deeply?
Yeah. So I created a policy and, as with any of you that are in kind of entrepreneurial environments, I was going to take it and then it got pushed off and then it got pushed off. And eventually I subletted my condo to try to like be a forcing function. And then I found myself sleeping in my friend's house in their guest room. We were always 6 months away from certain success and absolute failure. Right. And so there was never a good time. And, at some point I just had to pull the plug and take time. So I took 4 months, did a 6-week long, like 800-mile Buddhist pilgrimage in Japan, where you visit the temples around this island of Shikoku.
Wait, how long was that?
It took about 6 weeks.
Okay.
And I spent about a month in New Zealand. Really, the forcing function was I officiated my friend's wedding in New Zealand. And so I was like, if I'm flying all the way over there, I'm going to stay for a bit. And, did a bunch of other stuff that doesn't sound sexy. Like I, helped nurse one of my parents back to health. I like built a deck with my cousin. I composed my first song and performed it in like a bar. Just all these like little things that felt creative and fun, that I just didn't kind of prioritize time for. And I also just beat myself up a ton. I just played head games and, was like really struggling with, should I return to the company? What does it mean? What if it succeeds? What if it doesn't succeed? All those fun things.
Did you return to the company?
I didn't. So I stepped back up to the board. I kind of had to wrestle with this thing. And I think if you're a founder or an early employee at a startup, you understand, which is like, what does it mean if I leave and it fails? What does it mean if I leave and it succeeds, to your ego? And I kind of got to the point where I was like, all right, we had a few like acquisition offers fall through at the last minute in the past year. And I was just exhausted from that emotional roller coaster. And I was like, if I'm going to do anything else in my career, I need to stop the first thing. Right. And, so I feel like I had that character building moment of leaving and being like, I don't know, maybe it'll be more successful without me. Who knows? And within the next year, we got acquired. And so it was like, I got to leave feeling like maybe it fails. I don't know. That's fine. I'll be fine. And then also have like a bit of a, narrative kind of bump. So I think it was kind of, in retrospect, it was a great outcome. At the time, it felt real bad.
Yep. Okay, so I want to get into a question I often got when we shared the post that you wrote from people who were just like, I can't take any time off. What are you talking about? This is like such a fortunate, rare luxury, and I have no ability to do this. So I'd love to get your thoughts on what your advice would be to people like that.
I mean, the first thing I would say is just because you can't take time off right now doesn't mean you can't take time off. And I think being able to take this amount of time off is an extreme privilege. And it's also really important, and it has a huge impact on people's lives. And so, plan for it. I've talked to folks that have said, we'll take it when our kids are 10, or we'll save up for 7 years. And if you're saving up for 7 years, then I think most folks can afford to take a couple months off, but it has to be a priority. And so you have to ask yourself, are the things that you want to do in your life, whether it's spend more time with loved ones, get to know your kids, do some crazy travel thing, learn a skill, are they so important that you're willing to kind of, make a sacrifice and plan for it over time? I mean, all the happiness research tells you that it's the planning and the, expectation of what you're going to do that you actually get the majority of the joy from anyway. So I think you'll end up fine. And, the reason why I'm kind of dedicating some of my life and career to this now is I've just never heard of anything that you can do in your life that gives people so much joy and changes them so much. You can wait until something bad happens to you that jolts you out of life, and you blow everything up and move, or a loved one dies, or you get fired, and or you can kind of proactively do it yourself and probably have a better time and spend less time healing and that sort of thing.
What do you find is usually the trigger that gets people to actually take a significant time off?
It's usually something negative, unfortunately. I mean, it's usually something where people realize. I remember I had this anecdote from a consultant where she was like, I wake up and then I work, before breakfast, and then I work all day and I work through lunch, and then I have dinner with coworkers, and then I come back to the hotel and I work out just so that I can stay awake long enough to like finish my work, and then I go to sleep. And one day she looked at herself in the mirror and was like, I am not a machine. Like this has to stop. And so I think that most of folks are wired. I think the folks who are your readers are wired to like work, succeed, persist, and we're not wired to say, let's be like gentle and kind and loving and understanding to ourselves and take time for ourselves and things like that. So we, in the research, we kind of came up with this term for it called functional workaholism. So, like burnout actually has a very specific clinical definition, and I think we overuse it a bit. But I think we're like most of us are on the kind of path to burnout. And until we get off that path, it's like impossible for most folks to realize how crazy their work life was and how crazy they were, how bad they were feeling. So you really have to step off of that to notice that.
There's a session I did with a bunch of managers at Airbnb where we filled out these forms to measure your level of burnout. And I remember like, I don't know, half the people in the group were like, oh my God, I'm burned out.
Yeah.
According to this form.
And the other way, the more positive way that people enter into this is what we call exemplars, which sounds like a Knights of the Round Table thing. I need to come up with a better word. But like basically, if you've had an example in your life, whether it's culturally, right? You grew up in Australia or Israel, or your family, maybe one of your parents was a professor, and so they lived somewhere else on a sabbatical, or someone like you that has taken it, that gives you this permission, like, oh, that's possible, and like they're still alive and fully employed. And so that's really the point of what we're trying to do, is like share a bunch of these stories like yours to say, like, here's what I did. It wouldn't have happened without the sabbatical, and I couldn't have predicted what I would have done afterwards, at the beginning of the sabbatical, and jump into the rabbit hole, right?
Yeah. Mike in the chat shared just kind of exactly what you're talking about, that a lot of people wait too long to take their time off, and then they need a longer period to take time off because they're so burnt out.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I've seen that all the time in the research, right? Like you get to a point, I mean, because burnout is a real thing. And to the point about the definition, it's like an inability to have efficacy, right? So, I mean, at the beginning of my trip, I didn't plan my trip to New Zealand. I was just like, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. I didn't pick up a single tour book. Like I had no idea what I was doing, and it worked out fine. I probably did not do a lot of stuff I should have. I didn't go to the Lord of the Rings Hobbit town, which I'm actually glad. But it works out fine. And part of that is realizing that it's an exploration, and bringing your type A planning and everything to it, I think can be counterproductive for a lot of folks. So yeah.
I also went to New Zealand during my time off. I wonder what percentage of people on sabbatical go to New Zealand.
I think it's the perfect blend of the time zone is such that it's actually easy to be disconnected. Like even if you have internet, it's like weird times and what day is it? And so it's like easy to kind of be on your own and not feel like FOMO. And a ton of nature, which I think is really positive for folks. It's like you're getting out into your body, you're getting out of your head. And it's kind of easy, right? Like, especially if you're an English speaker, like you don't have to do much. You don't have to worry about crime. So I think it's kind of a chill place to go that gives you that. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, not very original. I think I did the 10-day silent meditation retreat, the New Zealand trip, like not very original.
Same. Also did both those things. Your book should have a chapter on go to New Zealand. Here's where you go in New Zealand. Okay. So another question that I got from people is, okay, I want to take time off, but my manager's not going to let me because I got work to do. Do you have any advice for how to convince your manager, your founders to allow you to take significant time off?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is you'd be surprised by how many stories start with, man, I was really nervous about asking my manager, and then I told them, and they were like, "That's an awesome idea," or like, "I've done that too." So I think one of the things about sabbaticals, it feels like a really well kept secret, um, and so like you got to ask, right? I know there's a lot of concern around will they think that I'm not committed to the company, this, and this, but there's also a study called the red sneaker effect, which measured the success of people in raising money based on how they dressed. So like, do you dress more casually, and what kind of signal does that send? So I do think that, you know, expressing vulnerability and expressing kind of what you want and being confident about it, like projects confidence. Um, it's a hard one to kind of believe, I think, ahead of time, but that's the experience that I've seen. And then, you know, the other thing I'd say is I've also heard a lot of, especially work at a larger organization, like look for policies that are buried. You know? And sometimes companies have these policies and they don't really want to advertise it, or it's not like an official thing. You know, folks who worked for.
Sorry about that. Oh, I think you got stuck to mute. Okay, one sec. Okay, there you go. You can unmute yourself. Okay, there we go.
Folks that I interviewed at the U.S. Treasury found out that there was a leave without pay option they could take. Teachers that I've talked to found that there's, you know, after a certain number of service, then their union contract, they could take a year off, and they keep their benefits and they keep the clock kind of marching towards their retirement, but they don't get paid. It's like these are the things that you might have to plan for, but you have to ask, you know, and I think you'd be surprised in a lot of situations.
So what I'm hearing is like ask and then maybe find the hidden policy already dormant in your company.
Yeah, it strikes me as one of those things
That's
where,
cool.
you know, especially given your experience of the popularity of this, like a lot of people are thinking about it, especially coming out of COVID. And you're going to be the one, if you ask, that probably will reap the benefits, because I imagine it's a thing that's lurking underneath the surface of a lot of companies.
Are there reasons for companies not to offer extended time off and sabbaticals to their employees?
I mean, I think the most legitimate reason is that it's not the right time. So, I mean, I started a company, like there's 0% chance that I was going to take time off in the first 5 years, or 3 years, or whatever that number is, right? So that's totally fine. Again, one of the messages I think that I need to hammer on is not everyone can take a sabbatical at any time now, you know. Like it's fine. So that totally makes sense. I think the biggest favor you could do yourself as an entrepreneur is say, like, as you're designing and spooling up the business, like at year 5, if I, as the founder, can't take 3 months off, like, have I done a good job setting up a sustainable business if it's still contingent upon my butt in the seat? So I think that's a completely legitimate reason to not take time off. I think that everything else to me strikes me as like a little bit not understanding the reality of the situation, which is people leave all the time. People take parental leave, people leave for other jobs. Sometimes they give you a lot of advance notice, sometimes they don't. You have to get good at that as a business owner. You have to like practice transferring responsibilities. You have to practice, you know, mitigating key personnel risk. So I think you're just kind of shooting yourself in the medium term foot by not letting people take time off.
We got a question actually through the chat. How long should people take off at minimum? I know you cover this in the post a bit, but it'd be cool to hear.
So I think about it as a bit of a gateway drug, and like if you took a month off, like I don't know how many folks, like it'd be interesting to know from the folks in the room, like what's the most time you've taken off, especially those who haven't taken a sabbatical. If you take a month off, your feeling of that time, I believe, is that was awesome. And like, man, that went by so fast. And I think that when you do that, you're like, no one really noticed I was gone that much. I'm going to plan to do a longer one in the future. But I think to get the best benefits from all the conversations we've had, it really feels like at least 6 weeks to just get into the zone of living in a different way. Just take off that identity of work and the, phantom kind of phone ringing in your pocket and like opening Slack and things like that, and just live in a new way. And so I feel like anything under 2 months is going to be tough, ideally over 3 months. And I think like 6 months seems to be this time that the folks are like, that's when I felt great, was ready to go back, but it was enough time to explore. You're not stressed out about what you're doing afterwards. To Mike's point, I think that if you are burnt out, it's going to take you longer. If a company is offering you a sabbatical policy and they're paying you and they have your job when you come back, it's a lot easier to be like, sweet, I'm taking off. I don't have anything to worry about. Whereas if you're quitting a job in a flame of glory and you have no idea what you're doing on the other side, I can understand why that would be stressful and harder to do. So as much as you can while like being able to afford it and not be super stressed out, but ideally more than 2 months.
That's a very clear and tactical answer. I love that. Something that we haven't talked a lot about is just like, when do you know that you should take extended time off? Like, I know you said burnout is this clinical definition, but do you have any just like signals of like, you should take 6 weeks off if XYZ?
That's a good question. I think it's a blend of, is there like a little idea that's been like knocking around in your brain that you're curious about, right? So Elizabeth Gilbert talks about like finding and following your curiosities to kind of take the pressure off of like find your passion. And then just kind of ask yourself, like, is there a time when I'm going to actually be able to do this? Right? Like if you want to get much, much better at the guitar or at ceramics and you need to invest a fair amount of time in it, like, has it happened in the past 5 years? Why not? Does anything look like it's going to happen in the next 5 years to allow you to do that? So that's like the positive, I think, perspective of when to take time off. And I think the negative, you can probably do a bit of a pulse with friends and family and coworkers just to be like, am I seeming like, how am I seeming? Am I seeming like I'm engaged? Like, do I seem happy? My coworkers, my co-founders were like, yeah, you seem like you're in a funk. Like you're snapping at us a little bit more. You're growing really bad facial hair. And, I think it might be time for you to take time off. So I think other people are a good litmus test. You probably take a bunch of burnout tests and things like that online as well. I don't know where you took your.
So we had some facilitator come in and give us some things to fill out.
Yeah.
What spurred me is we had a program where after 5 years you could take time off, and then eventually at 7 years I finally found an opportunity to, because we kept reorging, and there's always this like, it's not a good time. I gotta get this team off the ground and get things moving. So I think your point of just like plant the seed and then look for the opportunity resonates with me, because that's how it worked out for me. I want to talk about just like how to be successful in your sabbatical program, but before we get to that, what do you find happens if people don't take time off? Like what's almost at stake when people don't find this time?
So
crazy.
Listen, I was talking to a buddy who does actuary work, and just out of curiosity, I was like, what is the chance? What's the percentage chance that you make it to retirement if you're 30? And it was something like 90%, which is pretty good, right? Like 90% is an A-. But there's so many times that I've heard stories of sabbaticals that were catalyzed by people seeing their parents like finally drag themselves to retirement, like get across the finish line and then die. And so like, I really think there's like a bit of an existential, when are you going to do the things that you say you want to do? and like what would happen if you tried them, or if you tried to like tackle some of them. I hesitate to use the term bucket list, but I feel like the term bucket list didn't exist before the movie Bucket List, which I think is kind of interesting because it's now just in our lexicon. And it resonates with people so well, right? Like everyone knows this experience of being like, if I could, I would do that. And I challenge folks to kind of say like, why don't you just try doing it for a few months out of your life? You know, if you take 6 months off every 10 years, it's 5%, right? It's not that much. But like on the positive side, I think what's at stake is time and time again, we see that people return to life with like a more pro-social mindset. So doing things with their work or outside of work that benefit others outside of themselves. If everybody got to take a paid sabbatical from work, I believe that the world would be a much better place. Like people who were entrepreneurs, you know, for-profit entrepreneurs and said, I need to do something about climate change. And they started, you know, an electric airplane company or a vegan food restaurant chain. I think it's really tough to expect people to be thinking about things outside of themselves and their small circle, unless you kind of zoom out and get that perspective. So I think there's like actually big things at stake here. And if we don't take that time off to get perspective, we're just going to focus on the things that are urgent, and get kind of like sucked in by our phones and Slack and things like that.
That resonates very deeply. So Ankit has a question, and Ankit, if you want to jump in and ask, feel free. Otherwise, I'll ask.
Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to ask, like, I mean, when is it too soon to think about a sabbatical? So, for example, I start my career 3 years back. So, I mean, I start to think about a break or something. But like, is it too soon? I should wait for more time, maybe, to like see more things and then think about sabbaticals. Or, I mean, yeah.
Is your concern that it will not look good from a career perspective, or that you haven't like earned the right to take time off? Why would it be too soon?
Yeah, and same thing like about the career perspective. If it looked bad, or I mean, say if I want to go for an MBA, I mean, so in the next few years, will it look bad in that case, or in both cases, like career perspective and for future education as well? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think time off could always look bad. I think getting the wrong job, like if you happen to work for like Bernie Madoff's company or something, that could look bad. Like tons of things bad. And I think that the question is like, you know, what's at stake for you? I mean, look at Lenny's experience, which is obviously an outlier, but maybe by taking that time off, you find something awesome that you're really excited about that, you know, your MBA admissions essay really shines, right? So it's kind of like, it's kind of an unknown. I think, again, if you have something that you really want to explore, and you have the financial means to do it and the time, then you should do it. I think time and time again, when you have an opportunity to do something and you push it off, or if you have an opportunity to do something and you do it, I think people rarely regret doing it. Partially, it's a psychological trick you play on yourself where you like ex post rationalization. But I've never spoken to anyone that regretted their sabbatical. And I've talked to hundreds of people. And actually, I might have to change that anecdote, because people who took sabbaticals during COVID, that was not an easy time, because you like take away one's ability to travel for the most part. You take away their ability to meet people, and you're essentially like you're kind of cast off into this weird place where a lot of things you can do on sabbatical weren't available. But the person I'm thinking of who did that on COVID actually just got an awesome job. And so I wonder if she reflects like, yeah, it was a journey, but would I have gotten that job otherwise? I would also say, though, if you are planning on doing an MBA, I think that the MBA is the world's most socially acceptable sabbatical. You get to take 2 years and like you're learning and you're meeting people and you're traveling and you're experiencing different things. You're trying on different jobs and different lives, really, on for size. And then you get done and people pat you on the back for it. It's kind of amazing. So if you do feel like you want to do a career search, you know, the MBA is a great example and great excuse to do it.
Yeah,
Cool.
cool.
Sweet. Thanks, Ankit. If anyone else has questions, just DM me on the Zoom chat, and then I'll call in you, or I can ask your question for you. I want to get to, say you have a sabbatical coming up and you're trying to figure out how to plan it well. What advice would you have for people planning extended time off?
Yeah, and we were kind of talking about this earlier. I think I'm of two minds in how much advice to give folks, because I'll give you a framework, but part of it is really an experiential lesson, right? Like I had to live inside of my brain with no one to talk to in Japan for 6 weeks and watch myself like do the pilgrimage faster than anyone was doing it, like passing people and just tearing my feet to shreds, to the point where like one of my hosts one night was like, I'm taking you to the hospital. Like you cannot walk tomorrow. I had to have that experience to learn about myself. Like everything's a competition and like everything's an accomplishment versus just being present and kind of like being with something. And, you know, I had nowhere to go. No one was tracking how fast I was doing the pilgrimage. I'm sure that every person that knows me could have told me that exact thing, but there's no way that I would have internalized it to the point of like experiencing something myself. So part of me wants to say, you should just do the sabbatical that you want to, and then be attentive to what happens, right? Do you plan a bunch of shit and then you're really stressed out and you're tired at the end of it and you're like, why did I do that? Do you find yourself super connected and telling everyone about what you're doing and you didn't actually get to do the things you wanted to because they wouldn't sound cool? There's like very important lessons, even if you screw it up, that I think are like important to learn. That being said, I think the ways you can get the most out of it and have the least chance to screw it up is, I think, structuring it in like, find a way to make sure you're disconnected at the beginning, right? So like, can you get into your body by doing something with your hands or outdoors, you know, get disconnected from your phone, things like that. And I think the second, so I would not like read a bunch of books about like designing your life and figuring out what you're going to do. And like, just have a period where you're like, I'm not going to think about my future job. I'm not going to like criticize myself. I'm just going to like disconnect and try to heal and be present. And then I think the second phase is more of like exploration. So here's some things that I want to do. I want to try to develop this skill, or I want to see what it's like to work in this place. And, you know, maybe read some books and like really start to imagine what the future could look like. And then the third is kind of integrating that. So like, give yourself some time before you go back into the real world to say like, what have I learned? What do I want to do differently at this like next waypoint, right? And know that the lessons from it are going to like seep up over time. You're not going to be like, well, it's been 6 months and I have all the answers. Lenny, I'd be curious to hear if like how that resonates with how your sabbatical went and your experience doing Vipassana. Because I feel like, you know, you have some amazing realizations, I think, throughout the course of it. But for me, it was coming up, you know, 6 months, a year down the road.
So just to review, the framework is disconnect, explore, integrate.
Yeah.
That's basically exactly how my 3 months went. I had like the first month of doing nothing, where I just didn't plan anything and just did whatever felt right every day. And then I had a month of traveling, New Zealand, East Coast road trip, and that kind of thing. And then I had a month of startup exploration and like trying to figure out where I want to go next. And then at the very tail end of that, I did the 10-day retreat. And then I went back to work like 2 days later. So that wasn't the best timing coming out of that, but it ended up being really important because I came back very zen and centered and aware, and it became really clear to me that now is a good time to move on to something new. So that's kind of interesting that naturally I gravitated towards this 3-part system that you're recommending.
I think, you know, just one example of someone that did it really wrong, and David knows this guy from our company, and he'll tell you this as well, but he was like, man, all I want to do is spend a month skiing. I've always wanted to do that. and I want to take a couple trips with my parents, independently. And so he like went out, like started going skiing. And then within the first week, he had said on LinkedIn, like, hey, like left our company looking for the next thing. And so he found himself just getting inundated with people being like, oh, check this out. You should learn about this opportunity. And within 2 weeks of leaving, he was in like 2 or 3 job search, job hiring kind of processes. And he was like, shit, like I can't bail on these now because I would look flaky and burn bridges with people who referred me. But there's no way that I want to join a new thing right now. And he ended up doing that twice. So he disengaged from it and then he like re-engaged with the process a month later. So he ended up spending 3 or 4 months off, but had almost zero kind of time to himself when he wasn't thinking about the future and jobs. And he regrets it. Right.
That's great advice. Basically, don't look at open roles. Don't talk to anybody about new roles. Right.
I mean, I think one thing that COVID should have taught most folks is that most people actually don't give a shit what you're doing. And if you disappear for a month, like no one will notice, like 4 people will notice. And then when you come back and you tell people I was gone for 2 months, they'll be like, oh man, wow, had no idea.
Right.
It's all ego that you think people will care that you're out of the job market for 4 months, like, is there some sort of half-life on that just isn't true.
Right. I think partly I find that it's because we have all these algorithmic feeds now, and you can't really know if people are doing stuff and you're just not seeing it.
Yeah.
And you just assume, okay, I just didn't see what they were up to recently.
I think the other opportunity there is, if I think you're entering into a job search before you've properly gone through this discovery period and things like that, you're way more likely to end up doing something that's almost exactly like what you were doing before, which is great. Like that could be exactly what you should do. But it also could be not good because of course, all of your most recent contacts, all of your most recent experiences, all your network is going to be related to what you're most recently doing. And so it's kind of like a forcing function that like gravitational pull that you need to just experiment with, like escaping.
Interesting. Break out of the orbit. This is a good segue to a question Onik has. And I think you can unmute. Yeah, there you go. Is that how you pronounce your name, Onik?
Anik.
Anik. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Yes, so I have a question, and this question is personal to myself. And the question is, what if you're sure that you have found your purpose in life? You really know that what you're doing is what you are actually supposed to do. And now you're working hard on it. And people around you start telling you, hey, you need to take some time off. Hey, you need to take a sabbatical. And you actually don't think you're working hard enough. I can give you examples. So before I was in the fashion industry, I was a fashion model, but something was missing. And I was looking for my purpose. I was looking for what I'm supposed to do. And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I wanted to have a positive impact in the world. And I had 10,000 ideas. But when I realized the one I really wanted to spend my next 10 years on working hard, and the main objective will be to reduce poverty in West Africa by creating more jobs and increasing the economy. And then I created this business that will have this impact. And now I'm working on the business very hard. And I actually feel like I'm not working hard. And everyone is telling me you need to take some time off. I don't understand if the problem is me or if the problem is them.
I mean, first of all, that's a great problem to have, having found your passion, pursued it. It sounds like it's working. I can answer the question 2 ways. One is if everyone says you should do something and you're the only person that says you shouldn't, then like maybe you have something to learn from that, right? And I think the second is, what's like the worst that could happen if you step away, and what's like the opportunity that could happen while you're away. Like, for example, maybe some of your employees pick up the slack and feel like they can have growth opportunities while you're gone, and they're much happier at work. Maybe you find out that like something breaks and doesn't work while you're gone, and you need to like hire someone to do it. Maybe, and it sounds like you're quite confident about this, but like maybe you learn something about yourself that changes the tack of what you want the organization to do or what you want to do. Not necessarily now, but for example, I think I wrote this in the post, the founder of the African Leadership Academy in South Africa, he was like, all right, I need to leave. I don't need to leave now, but I need to leave in like 5 years. And in order to do that, because I'm so important to the organization has to plan for that. Because if you truly care about the impact that you're making and your organization's having, you can't be a key person that if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, it doesn't succeed. So like you owe that to the mission of the organization to make sure that it can be sustainable without you, I think. I don't know what you're doing, but just broadly.
DJ, I am in the situation where I am bootstrapping the business and I'm the only one working full-time. All of the other people are contractors. So if I leave, it dies. And I don't feel tired. I feel okay. I dance every single day. And I don't understand why they think I should take some time off. And I don't even understand why they're saying that I work hard, because I don't see results. I don't see results. And I feel like I'm not working hard enough.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it could be helpful to get a third party in there. So like a coach or someone that isn't biased and is more objective with, you know, like your feelings, what you're hearing. You can talk to them to get some advice. That way you're just hearing it from another person. And, you know, to what I said earlier, not everyone can take time off at any time, right? So it might not be feasible for the business, but that might be something that you can work towards, to say like, okay, I'm hearing what y'all are saying. Like, we're going to plan for me to take time off in 2 years. And, you know, what is it about me not having taken time off that's like causing a reaction from y'all? And how can we kind of work on that in the meantime? But I say, try to find a good coach to help you kind of work through some of those issues and feelings, and set a plan. Like, the business is not in a place where I can take time off. Here's the plan. Let's all work towards it over the next few years or something. Great. Do you have any good contact to introduce me as a coach? Yeah, I'm happy to introduce you to folks. So thank you so much.
Yeah, DJ's email is actually in the last post, which you can, I'll copy and paste in the chat also, just in case people want. Okay. Or yeah, DJ, I guess he could do that. And then Tim made an interesting point. There's a good check is if you feel energized after work. That's something I found really valuable during my time off. Is I found that if I basically decided I was going to spend more time on things that gave me energy and less time on things that didn't. And that was like my only heuristic for how to spend this time off. And it is what led me to this newsletter versus starting a company or all these other things I was thinking about doing. So that'd be my advice, is just notice what gives you energy and what saps your energy, and do more of the first and less of the second. Sounds like, so yeah, thank you, Anika. That was a great question. Yeah, that was a hard one to solve in 5 minutes. So it looks like Mimi has a question. Mimi, do you want to ask your question?
Sure, I'm going to stay camera off because I'm feeling a little unwell, but hopefully you can hear me. So yeah, I just left, sorry. I just left my job at Google and I'm planning to take some time off, but kind of intentionally jumped into this time without a plan, but I'm trying to not to fall prey to this feeling of, well, I have to do something really productive and inspiring with this time off, right? Like I'm feeling this pressure to achieve even in this period of time where I've given myself permission to do nothing. So, really, adventurous travel plans, or like coming up with like a startup idea, all of this stuff. I feel like I'm kind of falling prey to this impulse to not rest and sort of reset after a period of pretty extreme burnout. And so I was wondering if you or the group had some thoughts on how to combat this feeling of like productivity around taking time off. Thank you.
Yeah, the first thing is that's extremely common. I run these cohorts where I get people who are like planning to take a sabbatical or on sabbatical, to just have a bit of conversation, learn some things from my research, but also just kind of be there and support each other. That could be pretty helpful. What I would say is like, do both. Like I had a friend who he was trying to switch from green energy into civic tech. And he's like, I don't know what I should do. I feel like I should do something on my sabbatical that like shows that I'm interested in civic tech so I can pitch it on jobs. And I'm like, you're in charge of your own narrative here, right? Like, so I said, what's the best place for civic tech? And he goes, Estonia. I go, great. Fly to Estonia, stay there a week in an Airbnb and come back. And like, if you meet people and you're inspired about staying there and doing civic tech stuff, awesome. If you don't, talk in interviews about how you like went to Estonia to look at civic tech, and that'll be great. And people will think that's like exciting and impressive. Of course, he went there and decided to stay for a month, and it was great. And he worked at co-working places, met people, etc. But like, if you feel like you need to scratch that itch of looking productive, plan one thing at some point during your sabbatical that you can kind of trumpet and be like, here's what I did, and it was great, and I accomplished it. And then just do the rest, do everything else that you want to do. Put yourself in isolation at a yoga retreat or a something where you don't have to feel like you have to talk to folks about it anyway. You're disconnected. And I think when you're done with that period, you'll probably feel better. But your instincts are totally right. Like, heal yourself, get yourself in a good place. Put something on the calendar of like, okay, this is a thing I kind of wanted to do that sounds accomplishy that I can talk about, or don't, but, and just focus on healing yourself first. As I said before, no one's going to really notice that you're gone. Tell folks you want to take a month, put in an away message, uninstall the apps, and like start to do that hard work. This is hard work. I think that's the other secret about sabbaticals. There was a large percentage of the time where people were like, oh my God, you're on sabbatical. You're like walking around Japan. That must be so fun. And my experience of it was just like arguing with myself and like fighting the monkeys in my head and being like, oh my God, what should I do? Can I leave? So this is like a human ritual to go through, change and like needing space and evolving and separation, things ending. It's going to be hard, but I think you're going to do great. Just take care of yourself first.
That was awesome. Something that I did that I found really valuable that sort of answers this question is I created a little vision board of the things I kind of want to feel during this time off. And then I looked back at the end of it, and my photo stream on my phone was very close to that, what that vision board initially was, which was basically like, I don't know, travel, meditation, retreat, work on startup ideas, do some writing, things like that. So I found just like creating, it like sounds so corny, but I found it worked really well. Just like the intention of the things you want to get out of this time off. And one of those things for me was like work on startup ideas, which was maybe the most productive part. And that happened as a part of that.
Just if I could just ask Mimi, and if this is private, you don't have to share, but like, what if you could do anything and no one would know what you're doing and it would just feel good? Like, what would a couple of those things be?
Okay, sorry, she couldn't unmute herself. Okay, now you can unmute yourself.
Okay, great. I really would love to, like, if I could take all of the pressure off, probably travel for a couple of months, and just like spend some time sort of collecting new data. I've been in New York for 6 years. I've been working in sort of tech and startups for 6 years. And if I could sort of like completely take the pressure off of myself, I think I would just travel for 6 months and yeah, collect new data, I think.
Is there anything that's stopping you from doing that?
Besides COVID restrictions, I have to give myself permission, I think, to do that. I think it's mostly about giving myself permission to do that and not sort of, I do sort of like marketing consulting on the side, and I've always done that. And I've always sort of balanced like time that I've taken off with this like marketing consulting work, to sort of feel like I'm being productive. I've never really been able to give myself permission to just be and not do things and have an adventure. So I think it's a question of permission.
The sabbatical monster. You. Emma, if you've earned it.
Amazing. Thank you.
That's some sort of boundary where you're just like, all right, traveling for 6 months might be super stressful to commit to. Like, I'm going to do it for 1 month. Like, honestly, I think having some structure to fall into for the first bit can be helpful. That's why I mentioned like a yoga retreat or like scuba diving training, or fill in your passion or interest here. Because like you're going from like a car that's going 60 miles an hour to like, I went to a silent meditation retreat, which I cannot recommend. Like, you went from like 60 miles an hour to like 0. Like, you can't exercise, you can't write, you can't listen to music, you can't talk to anyone. So like, if you can do something where it's a little bit of like, all right, this is still like at the pace I was working, but it's on something I care about, or it's on something that I use my hands or my body, could be a good like deceleration. But just be like, I'm going to travel for 6 weeks. Here's like 1 or 2 places I want to go, and I'm not going to worry about it until the end of the 6 weeks. I'm going to set a calendar invite on your paper calendar that you're carrying around or whatever. And that's when I'm going to start thinking about the next step. Just start there.
If anyone else has questions, DM me. I have a couple more and then we'll wrap up. I'm curious, what are some of the most interesting things people have done on sabbatical that you've seen or heard about?
Was that to me?
Yes. No, it's all good.
I was writing to
yeah,
you.
I think Mimi, get your mind going. That was a great discussion.
I mean,
yeah. So you heard the question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, just so many stories, right? There's stuff that is going to make Mimi stressed out because it's like accomplishment mindset. Like, someone, took time off to write a book and things like that. But then there's just I think these really impactful stories. Like, to me, I took my mom on a train trip for her 70th birthday from Toronto to Vancouver. Like, it was awesome, right? It's just a thing that you probably could have done in normal life, but like never made the time to. And it was like an amazing experience. I remodeled my kitchen, right? Which I could have paid someone to do, and it would have been like 4 times as expensive and taken 1/8 the amount of time and consternation. People, like, I remember this one lady, she was super burnt out and she just wanted to like spend time with her family. So she flew to Paris, where her grandfather lived, and stayed, on the floor, sleeping next to him in his apartment for a month, which may sound like a nightmare to some people, but was like, tremendous in building this bond with someone who, who knows how long for the world he was. They always wanted to get like the next stage of scuba diving certification. So they went and did like a liveaboard and fell in love with their scuba instructor and like had a fling and stuff like that.
Wow.
And then there's this stuff where it's people who have been working for a decade and they've been raising kids, and they, one anecdote from the guy Justin, who I wrote about in one of the posts, he, at the beginning of the trip, they went to like 20 something national parks and, calculated all the steps and miles they walked and elevation that they did on the hiking trails. And, at the beginning of it, his youngest kid was just kind of like crying all the time and feeling like they're on a forced march and like didn't like hiking and this, that, and the other. And by the end, like the last hike, the kid started crying at the end, and Justin was like, "What's wrong? Like, I feel like you've been doing really well on these hikes." And he's like, "I just, like, my legs are too tired to make it like this many elevation, this hike, but like I really want to do it, but I don't want to ask you to carry me." And he just saw his kid like mature and have like self-awareness and emotional intelligence that he'd never seen before. And he certainly would never have noticed as the CEO of a business. So I think it's really the best stories are these like personal discoveries and realizations, not these like, I climbed Mount Everest. So if that takes even more pressure off Mimi, like, the things that you will remember, that you will talk about, are like, I stayed at this random village for an extra week because I met someone, playing soccer there, and I started teaching in the school. Not like the check out my 4 certificates that I have from my trip.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Let's wrap it there. How can folks, I don't know, should folks follow you where? There's a book coming out at some point. What should people know about you in the next thing?
Yeah, writing a book about the sabbatical research we did. One thing that I've kind of uncovered, I feel like there's like 7, we call them 7 sojourns, like 7 periods of time in people's life that I think there's opportunities for taking time off. Think anything from like a gap year before you start college to like a twilight career fellowship, as you're deciding whether to retire or ante up, where you're just starting to get married, or like you're an empty nester and your kids have left. So I think there's like this human ritual that we're missing of pausing at various times in your life and like stepping back and getting perspective. How you can get involved and get in touch. If you've taken a sabbatical, it's awesome to have your story to inspire other people like you. Being like a privileged white dude entrepreneur does not give like a bunch of people the confidence that it can work for them. And so like, I'm trying to find and have found a ton of stories of folks that have made it work in very different positions. And that's really helpful. So please kind of share your story with us. Mimi, whoever else, like join a cohort, because it's just bringing people together that are in the same place of concern, worry, wanting to maximize their sabbatical. It's just kind of a cool support nest that.
How do you join a cohort?
Email me. There's a link on the website, sabbaticalproject.org. And we actually are firing up a Facebook group. Like when I went on this Japanese pilgrimage, there's one Facebook group, and you kind of like, you get accepted, and then it's just people. It's amazing when people being like, I am caught in the rain between temples 37 and 38. Like I have no place to sleep. And then some Japanese person will be like, I'm picking you up. So it's a way to kind of help people along the journey. It's like a literal journey. And so I want to do the same thing on this kind of like metaphorical journey, that we're not actually on the same journeys together. But so the Facebook group's a way to do that. The Sabbatical Project, easy to remember, hard to spell.
.org.
Yeah, shoot me an email.
Amazing. Thank you, DJ. Thanks everyone for joining. Let's give DJ a little round of applause. I don't know. Here we go. How about, we can unmute. Yeah, there you go. Everyone's doing it. All right. Thank you, DJ. This was awesome.
On your journeys.
Great. Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks, DJ.
Yeah.
Bye.